Alright, here's how we're going to test our electrical circuits. You've got this baggie here with a bunch of gadgets and gadgets in it. And we're not really interested in the wire nuts right now. Shove those off to the side. So, for a power source, we're using a super safe AA battery. Not a whole lot that could go wrong unless you like eat it and choke on it or something. And for our testing, we're going to use a little 1.5 volt bolt and a screw-in base. Pretty complex stuff here. And then in your kit, you've got this little tiny twisted up wire. This is called bell wire. It's like 26 gauge or something like that. I don't even know if this will strip it. Yeah, it's so small the wire strippers won't even strip it. I just stick it in my teeth. There you go. Don't tell my wife I did that, she'll get mad at me. Alright. And then we'll just take our needle nose pliers, put a curve in that. You probably don't need the needle nose pliers, it's probably overkill, but what the heck, it's good practice. And then we'll connect this to our wire base. Oh, I have a broken screwdriver. Look at that. That's no wonder it wasn't working earlier. Now what? Let's try this again with a screwdriver that actually works. Gonna need these. Alright, when you're doing the wire loops around a screw, you want the wire to go in a clockwise direction. Lay down you. So when I turn the screw to tighten it, I'll be turning it this way. So I want the wire to go so that as I turn it, it tightens the wire down. If I go the other way, it'll peel the wire off as I tighten it on there. So we'll hook that on there. Tighten it down. Since we're using a regular old-fashioned incandescent light, there's no polarity we have to worry about. When we're working with household voltage, there's also no current polarity, but there is, I guess we'd call it a grounding polarity. We'll get to that in a little bit. See, got to make sure this is all the way done. That just fell right off of there. And see, this actually happens in the real world too. Like, you'll think you get it all tightened down and your system doesn't work. Alright, I did a little off-camera cheating there with some super glue. Alright, so let's test this, make sure this is working correctly before we go on. This time the wire's not falling out. Dun, dun, dun. It's not bright, it won't light a room, but it does show that we now have what's called a closed circuit. In other words, the electricity is going from the battery, through this wire, through the bulb, through this wire, and back into the battery. The other part of this just requires us to prepare this wire here, and we'll strip off just enough of that. And this goes in here, there's a little picture right there. So the flat end goes against the spring, and the bumpy end goes against the nut spring. And we can check it one more time just to make sure we've got a complete circuit here. Dun, 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 dun. A closed circuit with a successful battery check. Perfect. Now, there's a chance when you're storing these two leads could come in contact with each other. If it does that, you'll get a short circuit and you'll kill your battery, so it's a good idea when you're not using this to take the battery out. Alright. Or you could just roll it onto the floor. Let's do some tests. Alright, let's wire in an outlet. Well, a pretend outlet. Well, a real outlet, but pretend voltage. We don't want to kill anybody here. Promise me, you're not going to connect this to live voltage. We're going to connect a battery to this, and we'll do that in a minute. So we're going to use two of our boxes, and we'll use two apart from each other right there. And to do that, we'll need to prep these a little bit. So inside these boxes, there's a little punch-out hole. use your screwdriver. Just pop that out of there. Or maybe your pliers. There we go. Pop out that little tab right there. Same thing over here. There we go. In the real world, we'd be nailing our wire to the box, but we're trying to keep it simple for now. All right, we've got our wire that we've already stripped. Honestly, in the real world, I'd probably feed the wire. I would definitely feed the wire through and then strip it. But you know, because of the nature of this is how it's going to be. So we'll feed our wire up inside here. You want to make sure you get the cabling all the way through into the box. You don't want to have unprotected wire outside of the box, because that goes in your wall section there. All right, now in the real world, we wouldn't be fighting with the sheetrock behind us. We do all this before the sheetrock went on. But, you know, distance learning being what it is, we have to make sacrifices. Whew, all right. So like I said, real world, we'd have to have a staple within, I think it's within 6 inches of the box, because we don't want this moving around or possibly sliding out of the box. Another thing is when you're wiring this, you always want to leave extra wire sticking up. Okay, about 6 inches from the front of the box. If you cut these too short, trust me, it is a nightmare trying to get this back in. All right, so this box here, this is going to be connected to our power source. This is a pretty simple circuit because all we need is just the hot, the neutral, and the ground. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you my daughter's fingernails. Screwdriver. Pliers. Where was I? Oh yeah, so outlet, wires. Now here's how we remember this. When you look at this outlet, you have a wide and a narrow plug. That's for the polarization. Now it's alternating current, so it's not really polarized, but that's how it's done. And the way I remember it is wide is white. So the two W's go together. So the wide side will be the white side. Remember, when you flip it over, it's going to be backwards. Something else to notice is the wide white side is the silver screw. The brass screw is going to be the dark one. So the light color goes to the light screw, the dark color goes to the dark screw. The other thing to remember is that the black wire is your hot lead. So black wire is your hot lead. Your white wire is your neutral, and neutral and ground go together. So the white and the ground, if you look in your circuit box, will often be connected to the same bus. So to do this, we'll use our needle nose pliers, and we'll put a loop into the wire. So 180 degrees, just like so. Do that to all 3 wires. And the ground, and you want to make sure that this wire doesn't go too far down. Since we're only using one connector, we're going to close off one of these screws. I don't like to leave those open. Make sure that's good and tight. Same thing on the bottom one. Now when we go to add an outlet, we use that other one. Now these also have a stab-in connector right here. So if I take a wire that's not been used already, you can stab into the back, but this is not a screw clamp stab-in. It just has a little spring clip on it. I never use these. If somebody calls me and says, hey, my electrical outlets aren't working, first thing I ask is, when was the house built? Because houses built in the 70s and 80s, they use these stab-in connections like crazy. And what happens is over time is that spring tension weakens and the wire just falls out of the back. It stops making an electrical contact. So I like to use anything with a screw-in connector. Now, some of these, the more expensive outlets you can get at the store, actually have a hole where you slide it into the hole and it doesn't catch it. This screw actually tensions down on the hole, and that's okay to use. All right, so I'll start with the ground. And I want to loop it so that the loop goes around clockwise. The screw is going to turn this way to tighten, so I want the wire to come up and down in the direction that it will tighten. Like so. So as I tighten it, it's going to want to pull that into itself. If I go the other direction, it's going to try to unwind that screw right there, that loop. I'll tighten that down. There we go, and make sure that both sides of the wire are under the screw. And we'll repeat that for the white side. We can use our pliers to align it. That hook's on right there. Make sure that that tail end of the wire is not protruding past the bottom of the outlet. So the only place you should see bare copper is right where the screw is. Nothing hanging down past the blue. Okay, we'll flip that over. And again, we're going to make sure our wire is looping clockwise. So when I tighten the screw, it doesn't try to untighten the wire. This would be a good time to mention, actually this would be a bad time to mention, that we always do this with a power off. Notice there's no power going to my outlet as I'm wiring it. If this were in a house, I would be disconnecting the power and using some sort of a tester to make sure there's no power to this. Okay, let's double check our outlet. We've got the black on the side with no ground screw. The white is on the side with the ground screw. And the white's on the double, the ground screw's on the green, so green and ground always go together. And these two screws, it doesn't matter whether you go top or bottom, because they're connected by this little tab right here. So I can connect it there or there, it doesn't make any difference. And same thing on the back side. As long as that tab's in place, it doesn't matter. All right, let's go ahead and install our outlet. Looks good. So let's put it facing this way. And what I like to do before I put it in the box is kind of do a pre-fold. So fold it one way, fold it the other way. And I kind of do a zigzag just to make sure it's going to go in there. Line up your screws and tighten it down. Alright, I've done a little time warp for this first video. We now have our power source and our testing. So, here's how we're going to do this. On this side of the box we have our power supply. This is our junction box. Normally this would be a circuit box, but it's not unusual to find in a house just a random box with a wire in and a wire out. So on this, what we'll do is we're going to connect this to our system. This is a low voltage system. So our positive lead on DC is going to be our hot lead on the power system. And I'm going to check really quick. We're going to use our orange wire nuts. First thing I want to check is to make sure that I don't have too much wire exposed, and I do. Look at that. There's too much wire there. I don't want to have any exposed conductor once the wire nut's on. So we'll use our wire cutters on the back of your pliers, and I'm going to trim off about 1/4 of an inch of that. And I'll go ahead and do the white wire at the same time. Okay, using our orange wire nut, we're going to connect the positive lead from the battery to the hot lead of our circuit. We'll put our wire nut on there. And for this one, since we're just testing this, this is not a permanent installation, we don't need to do the full twist, just enough to get the wire to hold on there. The negative lead on the battery will go to the neutral lead of our system. And this is something you'd never do in a house, but in this case, we're just testing. This is something we can do at home and we can do safely. All right, so I've got my system in place. On this end over here, we're going to check to see if we have voltage. So we'll plug our battery in, flat side to the spring, nubby side to the not spring. And in this case, since we're using 1.5 volts, there is no ground, so we'll leave the ground open right now. If this were a permanent installation, of course, this would all tuck inside and there'd be a cover over the top. Now, if we go to this side, we should have, I put my light right there. I should like screw that down to something, shouldn't I? Need a screw. Yeah, we'll fake it. Now, before I do this, I'm going to say this a million times, right? This right here is not connected to my house current. There's a 1.5 volts, totally safe voltage. I can touch that to my tongue. It's not going to do anything to me. So in this instance, in this instant only, it is safe to put something metal into these outlets. Do not try this with an outlet at home. All right, so we're just going to take and stick one into each side of my outlet. And dun, 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 we have power. And if we do it to the top outlet, we also have power. So that concludes this test. Now, when you take a picture for your portfolio, be sure to get that bulb lit up at the same time. You'll probably need to elicit the help of some friends. One person takes a picture, we've got this all lit up. So what I want to see on this is the power on this side. I want to see this outlet in here. And I want a second picture with this outlet actually out of the box so I can see inside it. All right, we're going to end this video. In the next video, we're going to add a circuit and add a box over here.